All right, welcome back. This is part 3 of the handicapping session with Scott Shapiro and John Doyle. I guess it's sort of less of a handicapping session, more kind of a horse by horse. We have tons of great information here and insight. So we'll finish out this video with the horse, off recording. The three of us were sort of talking about is an interesting horse in the number 14 Hence, a horse that we all just kind of quickly our comments offside thought this was an interesting horse with some upside. Like the last race, and John, I'll ask you this because it's sort of one thing that's come up in the past couple videos regarding quadrant 4 with this horse. Do you see this horse as a deep closer? Because I know he has run close to the pace in the past.
Yeah, I mean you gotta look at the races that he ran close to the pace. Those were slow races, slow early pace, right? So. It really depends on the pace scenario. So that's good in the fact that the horse can adapt, right? So he's not kind of a one-dimensional type of horse. So that's the one thing I would look at. So, in the Sunland race, that was an extremely fast pace. It just melted down. And so, he was going to be far back. So the good thing about him is that I don't think he's one-dimensional. So if the race is a little bit slower, maybe he could... be closer to the pace. And I think when we get into the pace scenario of the Derby, like in future stuff, we'll talk about that because so many times I think it confuses people with pace. You could be a deep closer, right, that could run really well with slow early paces. You don't need a fast early. You need a contentious pace. You don't need a fast pace. And you could be an early pace horse that does well with fast pace races, right? Sometimes you got to kind of look at that, and I think that speaks to class. So so a horse that can handle fast paces and be up front and still handle it and have the ability to win or run well is obviously a better horse. So those are some of the things you got to look at. You just don't try to lump everything together and say, oh, the race is going to be fast, so it's not going to be a fast pace. An early pace horse doesn't have a chance. Well, that's not right.
And kind of going off of what you're saying, and you go back and you watch the Sunland Derby, that's sort of the way he ran. I mean, on his running lines, it looks like he didn't make his move until the stretch, but he actually starts to progress really nicely on the backstretch, kind of going right into that. About at the half mile, he starts to make his run and sustain it all the way throughout. And we gave this race, you and I talking about it. It'll come up in the grid soon. Again, I'm using Dev here. But being a B plus race, a race that we thought was impressive visually. Scott, you wanna throw some thoughts in?
Yeah, a couple things. It's hard to knock his last race in the Sunland Derby. If you look back to the Southwest, though, he was pretty poor. So it'll be interesting to see if he continues to move forward, or can he get back to that race, or whether that was an outlier to an extent. I do think it's encouraging that he gets the extra time from the other preps. March 26th of the Sunland Derby. I know he's been at Churchill for some time, being an Asmussen runner, and from all accounts, take them for what they're worth. He's been doing well there. And I do like the fact that I think Giroux fits this horse well. So, at this point, he's a horse that I think we all agree is at least worth considering and looking at further as we move closer to the race.
Yeah, I'm going to add on that because I think you brought up the fact that he's working locally, and looking at his work tab here, he has 3 works since that race, April 10th, 17th, and 24th, and these are all, I know it's just going on paper, but since I kind of had historically, they're pretty strong works, and I'm glad you brought that up because he looks ready to put together another good race and just could be coming in at the right time.
Yeah. It's just one other thing too. It's just an optics thing, just to point out down the road. And I think you have the Dev up, right, Emily? So if you look at the Southwest race, you see the optics fig range for that race was 105 to 99. Correct. That tells me that was a really kind of solid race. I think it's one of the highest ones I see in the whole PP. So that's a future, and what that is it's not just a par number. It just tells you the range of the horses capable, what they were capable of running in that race. So it just shows you that the higher the numbers, obviously, the better the horses. And it takes into consideration recency. So, sometimes with these par numbers or whatever, you may have a lot of good horses in the race, but, they may not be ready to fire. This optics range, I think, gives the best of kind of what it's going to take to win the race, but kind of takes in consideration recency, which is important. So you're not getting a bunch of horses coming off a long layoff, and who knows what they're going to show back up with. So that looked real strong in terms of an Optix fig range. I just wanted to point that out, that Southwest.
Yeah, I'm glad you did. That's an awesome feature that we have on coming out in the new grid. The number 15, fast and accurate. One of the horses is last race, a B-. It's just kind of from, and I know it's not in there. This will all be updated. We're doing this early. A B- in a stakes race is probably not something that we're going to be looking at going into a grade 1. Visually, I was not impressed. John, I know you want to add you weren't impressed either on this.
Yeah, no, I mean, this horse had the perfect pocket trip, swung out, came off cover a little bit, as they were coming off the turn, and I mean, it was, life and death to hold on. It was all over the track. The whole race kind of seemed to be collapsing late. Visually, I can't even recommend that horse, winning the Derby off that kind of a performance.
Yeah, I mean, then you just look back at his races in the grid, and his worst race, that at Parks is one race on the dirt, kind of being the worst race from an Optix fig standpoint. So hard to endorse. Scott, is this horse a complete toss for you?
Yeah, I think he'll be I think I have him down as the least likely winner, and I hate to mock him, but I don't think he's that fast, and I don't think he's accurately placed in this field, so maybe his name is not too fitting, but yeah, he kind of would need to walk on the lead to have any chance, and that's not really going to happen, and he just seems like he's just overmatched.
Right. All right. Well, let's move on to the number 16, and I think we'll probably talk about this horse quite a bit, McCracken, because at one point was he ever the favorite? If he wasn't the favorite, he was the first and second choice in the futures. Prior to that last race in the Bluegrass, that double layoff line coming in, where he had trouble start in tactics, 4 back-to-back B+ efforts. Just sort of looking at that trip in the Bluegrass, on the extended Comet, awkward break, ridden closer to the pace, kind of taken out of his running style, is a bit shifty in the lane, and I also noted, which is not uncommon for him, he's done that in the past, where he's not really kind of keeping a straight line, grinding away. I saw him the other day on the track, wasn't in a work, just kind of jogging on the track, and visually, I was like, oh, that's McCracken. Like, he just didn't wow me. I really kind of liked him going in, and I'm sort of kind of backing away from him, and I feel that that's the trend. John, what do you think? Do you think he's kind of moving forward, or have we seen McCracken?
Yeah, I don't know. I did the Sam Davis, and I was kind of borderline giving him the B+. I mean, I had thought that Tappert actually ran better that day. I was kind of hedging. I was kind of back and forth. The Bluegrass was kind of that odd. I think we got a call coming. He was close up to
It wouldn't be an Optix recording without a phone call in the background. So at least if nothing else, we are consistent. All right.
Yeah. So I didn't like that he wasn't able to keep up, even though it was a fast pace. And you're right, he was kind of like out of his run style a little bit. He was closer up. Mm-hmm. So what I'm concerned is he kind of a one kind of move horse, and that would concern me in the Derby. Going mile court. And I don't know. Sometimes it's hard to see because I'm not seeing these horses. I'm seeing a lot of them on video and stuff, but he don't look like that big of a horse to me.
No, he doesn't, and that's what I saw the other day when I was like, he doesn't really. I was like, he just looks kind of like a horse. I was surprised because I think I've seen him before and thought he looks very classy looking, and maybe just I agree with you. I think that's with that observation, kind of a smaller guy.
I just think he's a one-move horse. He's got to time it right, and maybe he gets lucky. But I just think the Derby, you get stopped. Especially if you're off the pace type, you're going to get stopped. You're going to get you have to hold up, and maybe he makes one late run and kind of hits the board. I don't know. I'm just I'm not big on the fact that he's going to win this race. He's got to win this race. So, I'm kind of lukewarm.
Yeah. Scott, I'm back from a phone call.
No, I ignored phone call for you
Alright.
guys. Come on. In terms of McCracken, I think he's going to be an underlay in this race from a gambling perspective. I hear a lot of people saying, the opposite of what you said, and I'm on your side of things. I've never been wowed by this horse, really. I mean, I think he's run a couple nice races, but I think he's a little bit slower than the top horses in the race, and on even his best day. He's going to have to get the perfect trip, like John said, and not have any hiccups and time it right. I just think that his best case scenario is hitting the board and not winning the race. And when that's the case, to me, he's going to be, maybe I'm off on this, but between the local, the 3-for-3 record over the racetrack and kind of a lot of excuses for his bluegrass and him needing the race, and that was a workout, and a lot of those kind of publicly stated things by the barn and by his supporters, I think I'm going to end up tossing the horse because of the price, and he just hasn't run a really fast race yet. So to me, he's a contender to hit the board on a best case scenario, but worth taking a shot against as a gambler.
And we'll see as far as plot as well, but I kind of got negative on him this week, and we'll move down to number 17, Battle of Midway. I give him a B effort, which is the same as the winner, Gormley, in that race in the Santa Anita Derby. Showed some grit, was against the flow, so a good race in a race that kind of just landed in the lap of the winner. He's got to really move forward, though. Doesn't have a whole lot of seasoning, and optics figure wise, highest being a 91. You'd have to project he's going to improve. Gosh, what do you think, John?
13, 14 points. That's a lot.
That seems like a stretch.
Yeah.
I know when Scott and I did the analysis for this video, I kind of talked about these two horses, Battle of Midway, and then the horse that's no longer with us, as kind of being some now horses, but he just sort of seems like an outsider in this spot.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Just too slow.
Right, and pace maybe not in his favor. The number 18 Patch, almost the same thing, and I think we're going to kind of find this trend as we get horses on the outside, kind of lower in the points. Horses that just don't have a lot of seasoning, kind of eking in. This horse is moving forward, optics fig wise, 74, 92, 100, was able to save ground, break from the rail in the Louisiana Derby. After watching this race, do you think he's got another move forward?
He could be. I mean, that wasn't a bad race, and he's one of these horses that maybe could get in the picture at a underneath at a big price. Because like of all the Pletcher horses, this one probably will get overlooked. And look, I mean, anytime these horses are improving like this, and that last race he closed, and it was a 9-furlong race, and who knows? If there's another move upside, that 100, if he could run like 104 or 105, it could get him into the mix, or even a 101 or 102 could, maybe he gets a chance to hit the board at a big price. I don't know what I assume that this guy will be overlooked, but who knows?
I think those are good points. The more that you're talking about, I'm kind of looking at him, and I know he's only had those 3 starts, but none of them have been bad. I mean, he's got that BTL in the debut, and then a B+ breaking the maiden, and then ran, was put into stakes company and ran a B. So he's a horse that's has talent. I mean, the notes are clear. Like this is a nice horse. An interesting one at number 18. We'll move out to Battalion Runner, another Todd Pletcher horse. And I guess...
Can I throw one thing on Patch?
Yeah, absolutely.
I totally agree with you guys. I kind of got back onto this horse when I watched the Louisiana Derby a couple times yesterday. I thought he ran every bit as good as Gervin in that race, given the less than perfect voyage that he had, it seemed, and the one that Gervin had. He was on the rail. He just, the break was one thing. I know that it says it in the running lines. I'm looking at bump break, but more for me was just the stretch run was a little bit less than perfect. And I think that he kind of took I don't know about the speed ratings for optics, but maybe took a little step backward off that big second race at Gulfstream. I think he might have a move forward in this race. So yeah, out of all the Pletcher horses, he might be the one I'm most interested in using, based on value, of course. Obviously, there's horses that might have a better chance of winning, purely just predicting the race. But I agree, John. I think he's going to get completely overlooked, and I think this horse has some talent. He's the horse with the one eye, mind you, but I don't know how that will impact things. Don't want to try to guess, but yeah. So I'm on board with you guys. Just thought I'd throw that in.
Yeah, I'm obviously horse first going into the race, but it seems like Calumet this year, for whatever reason, seems to have some horses that are, very, very well meant for the Derby. Another Todd Pletcher horse getting in with points to the outside, Battalion Runner. And John, you have this Wood Memorial note, and kind of just off that, this would be a horse you would kind of just dismiss right away. A B-, bias, and shorter, which you don't want to see going into a race that is longer and probably not a bias. Do you think that's pretty accurate?
Yes, and then if you look back at the Gulfstream race, perfect, and then a lone trip on the other win. I just think this horse is, I don't know about what the right distance is, but I don't think it's 8. I don't think it's 9 furlongs, and I definitely don't think it's 10 furlongs.
Mm-hmm. Scott, did you kind of see it all the same? Another horse that's maybe a pace factor and not much for the stamina.
Yeah, and considering looking at some of these pace horses, I'm kind of hoping from a selfish standpoint, because I want to use some horses from off the pace, and I'm sure knowing you, Emily, you will as well. But I'm kind of hoping that one or two of them draw towards the inside, and maybe one gets the 20 hole, and we can really spice things up front. So we see some chaos as we come down the stretch. So yeah, to me, this horse will be involved early, probably, but not late.
Yeah. All right, we'll move to Untrapped. Also coming out of the Arkansas Derby, a C+ effort. We probably have to go back and look how many last out C+ have moved forward into the Derby. But to me, that doesn't seem favorable. Not something you want to see. And again, just kind of seems light on grades with B- in all those stake races. So that's something I put a lot of stock into. So kind of right off the bat, that's sort of a negative for me. John, do you kind of use grades in the same way?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I know, and then I didn't like the grit -2 back in the Rebel. So yeah, there's that. To me, that's a little bit concerning. Didn't run bad in the Risen Star, right? But it just seems like he hasn't kind of moved forward since that race. And I think in the Derby, really what you want to do is the horse that's thriving usually wins the Derby, or at least, those are the horses that perform better. They're usually coming up to their best race because you need it. There's just so much against you that you want a horse that's kind of like hitting on all cylinders, come race time. And he doesn't have that look to me.
Right.
He's not a bad horse.
I'm sorry. You can even see it in that last race, that you mentioned, the grit minus, and then when he comes back in the Arkansas Derby, they added the blinkers, so they kind of saw the same thing. So it was like, oh, we'll put the blinkers on him, and that'll kind of give him that extra, that extra focus when needed, and then it didn't work. So if you don't have it, you don't have it, I guess. Scott, I know you've been following these races.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing you can say is that he lost a ton of ground. I wasn't one of Mike Smith's better rides that race, whether it was his decision or whether the horse wouldn't relax. He made a 4 wide move when it didn't seem necessary. But it wasn't like it cost him the race by any stretch, But this horse seems to be a cut below, and with 1 win going into the race, is light on wins. Just would be pretty surprising if he runs big.
Yeah, it just looks on a little bit below. We're kind of getting into the 21-22, and I think we'll kind of end it at that. The number 21, looking at Lee. This horse, we will talk about him for sure because he does get in. Again, I mentioned Malagasy is not going to race, so looking at Lee definitely has enough points to make the field. Last time out, Arkansas Derby, B grade, free closed tactic. I got some questions about this on Twitter, and I just like. It's a horse I've always kind of liked. I've always thought he kind of had some upside and had some trips. And I thought he just, when he was moved to the inside late in the stretch, he just didn't seem like he wanted to run inside of horses. And then he was tipped out and then just still didn't have enough. I didn't think there was that much of a trip. And I feel like that trip, from what I've seen on Twitter, was just kind of given... They kind of pushed more of a trip than I saw. I don't know if you guys watched that and have a different opinion on that race.
I think it was an encouraging race to an extent that he did move forward. He's that dead closer that needs everything to go perfectly, and it really hasn't happened since a couple races at Ellis Park. But he's a horse I'd probably prefer almost more than J-Boy's Echo if you're looking for that, 3rd or 4th spot bomb to come from way out of it if they go too fast. He could fit that profile for me. I don't know what you think, John.
Yeah, I'd be using him in the 3rd and 4th in my exotics vertical plays. There's no doubt. There's no doubt he can definitely, especially comes out of the Arkansas Derby, which we kind of ranked as a good race. And I think that the Arkansas Derby kind of was, the only thing concerned about the Arkansas Derby, I don't like that 3 weeks. I like the 4 weeks, but that's fine. But it was more kind of like a real Derby prep, because with some of these other races, I mean, like, for instance, the Wood Memorial comes to mind, and the Bluegrass. Those races were like small fields. The Arkansas Derby was kind of a real feel of a Derby. You had, it was bulky field. Just kind of the way it was run. You had to show something, and I just think, coming out of that race, getting that experience is good. And I could see this horse definitely getting a piece of it.
And I'll go back, and the race that kind of turned me onto him was that Breeders' Futurity, which he has a B and a grade 1. I think that says a lot, and not only just a B, but a BTL. So I'm a fan of this horse, and don't get me wrong. I felt like maybe I misspoke and thought that his trouble didn't matter, because he did run a solid race. I think it is something to improve off of, and I totally agree with you guys.
Yeah, and the other thing about him, I mean, he really hasn't run bad, and he's been able to. He's been running on lots of different track surfaces, right? So, and he did run pretty well at Kentucky, So it's like, he's one of these horses that was already had a lot of experience, a lot of different tracks. So maybe the whole Derby environment is not going to melt him down.
Just to touch on something that you mentioned, John, and I know that the Santa Anita Derby, for one, is an example of this, a race that came back slow and people are tossing, but I do find it interesting that, like the Arkansas Derby as well, it was much more of a true test of how this race is going to play out, with a bunch field and a lot of horses to deal with. Do you kind of, would you move horses forward with looking at that stuff, or would you maybe look at the other races with those smaller fields and move them, maybe backwards, or some of both?
Yeah, it all depends on the trip, right? So, sometimes in a bulky field, if the horse obviously, I like the fact they're in a bulky field, because that shows they can handle that kind of contention. Exactly. But the Derby is so unique, right? You're not going to, like horses that come out of these 6-horse fields, and unless they're going to, be up front or clear or something like that, then it would concern me. But, I would just say that, excuse me. We're just enough. But
popular we are.
Yeah,
indeed.
but the other the downside is if it's a bulky field and it's like a short time before the next race, sometimes those bulky fields, the horse could get bounced around, and sometimes those races could take a lot out of them. They get a lot of kickback and stuff. So the experience is good over the long term, but maybe there's a short-term thing. If the horse gets a rough trip, that it may take something out of them, right? Because you see how, like, horses really kind of regress after the Derby. A lot of horses regress after the Derby. You know, even the winners kind of like don't come back and run like a big race in the Preakness. I know it's a short rest between the races, but you know, some horses, you know, like, you know, they don't kind of bounce back after the Derby. It takes them a little time. They give them a little time. So, you know, so sometimes these big fields and the races themselves, the way they run, the bumping, the jostling, the dirt kickback and stuff like that, you know, could take something out of a horse. So it's all depending on, you know, what the trip is. But long term, the experience is great, especially for a race like the Derby.
I want to ask one more thing, just as you were talking, and just kind of from an overall standpoint, because he's definitely, John, a horse you said you're going to use, but is your reason for not putting him in, like, would you put him in a win contender spot, or do you see him more as an underneath, kind of based on the trip? I see more than an underneath spot. Okay, it's just you know, it's going to depend on how that whole plot kind of lays out a little bit. So more underneath, just kind of based on trip, more than you know, he's good enough. Like if he had a different running style, you might upgrade him.
My concern with with him and I, because I really very important. I look at kind of race shapes. If the Derby goes fast early, you know, that's I want to. It seems like he could handle lots of things. You know, like if the race is fast early, he can get way back and do okay. He's also like, like if the race is slow though, and average is slow, I may get concerned because it looks like he kind of we talked about this before in the other videos, is like some of those closers like a real fast pace, and when the race falls apart, they kind of clunk up. I see him more as that. If he was a more multi-dimensional closer, where if the race is kind of slow, he can be a little bit closer and then close into that. I don't know if he's that kind of horse. I think he's more of the latter, the initial one I mentioned, the former, where, I think he's going to have to get the race shape and he's going to kind of pick up pieces versus, he can adapt and, it depends on what it is and he can be closer if it's slower. And he's got these couple of moves. I just think he's more of going to be like a clunker-upper. That's why I don't like him in the win end. I don't know if that answers the question.
Right. Thanks. Yeah. Cool. Let's move on to the horse just on the another horse that's kind of on the bubble, but we'll include because likely that's going to happen. This is a maiden horse yet to get a win, running in some solid company. Hasn't quite run a B race since going back to Del Mar. Another horse, kind of very similar running style, and he seems very much pace dependent and one run closer. Scott, I know you're familiar because he's California. What do you think? Kind of the same thing?
Well, if you look at the October 8th race, he broke my heart that day. I love this horse, going two sprints to a route at 9-1, and he looked like the winner, and he missed by a nose to a horse that Turn of Art that you're familiar with, Emily, I know. I respect Keith DeSormo quite a bit and respect the fact that he thinks this horse is worthy of running in the races that he has the last few times without winning. Again, I guess I could see this horse picking up pieces late if he gets in. That seems to be what he does best. But I do prefer some of the other late running types. Although the one thing is, I've talked about it a lot. He's with other horses, he has moved forward at a nice steady pace, which is something I like to see. So maybe he just continues to get better and can pick up the pieces at what should be an absolutely huge price.
John, what do you think?
Yeah, I like him. I like him to pick up the pieces. I can't really separate him and the horse that we were talking about before, looking at Lee, too much. Look, I know looking at Lee's running better races and all the rest, but I just think to Scott's point, this horse, I like the kind of improvement I'm seeing from this horse. He just seems to be getting better. the Somo is a really smart rider too. I think this horse could be picking up pieces late, and why not? I mean, just look at the Arkansas Derby. There's not much separating these horses, and like I said, that Derby, the Arkansas Derby, number-wise for us came back good. So why not? I mean, I think this horse. I like them on the Arkansas Derby day because I thought the race set up for them. Let's see how the plot shakes out, but both of them are exotic contenders.
Oh, he uses underneath. Yeah, and he's similar, since you brought up looking at Lee, and I'm looking at the race shapes here. Sort of the same thing. He's kind of had some average to slow paces early, and he does make that move. So he's got a middle move. He's not just like, oh, the race falls apart. He's got a run, but he doesn't have, like you said about some of the other horses, necessarily that two moves that sometimes you need in the Derby.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at like McCracken, this horse, looking at Lee, a couple of the others we mentioned, and you start saying, oh, they all got one move, they all can kind of clunk up. Well, which one are you going to want in your underneath your exotics, right? I mean, the price difference is going to be humongous, right? So that's to kind of like look at in this. You got to find your key, you got to find your anchor. I think Scott had somebody for who he thinks is going to be, I forgot which horse he mentioned in one of the videos, as a horse most likely to finish in the money, right? So you need your horse who's most likely to finish in the money, and then you can kind of build your tickets out around that. So that's you could do worse underneath with these horses. And every year it seems like in the Derby, one of these.
Last year.
Except last year.
Shocks in order last year.
Yeah, it's been form for the last couple of years, but I think we're going to get back to seeing somebody surprise underneath.
Agree.
All right. Well, we're gonna kind of touch base next week. The plan is to record on Wednesday following the draw. We'll have a final plot. We'll have a final field, post positions, and everything. So you guys look forward to that. That's going to be next Wednesday. Scott, John, and I sort of doing a final breakthrough. It'll be a lot quicker because we've already kind of done this footwork, talking about each horse, and can kind of really start breaking down the race. Anything you guys want to add,
Yeah, just one thing. Their optics weekend. The weekend of the Derby, you're going to get not only the Derby and the Oaks, but the whole weekend for $50, and it's good information. And we're going to do a horse by horse analysis like we're doing, but we're going to actually write it up and give our kind of ideas about the Derby and the Oaks. So we'll look forward to that.
Yeah, it's such an awesome deal. I know a lot of people have already taken advantage of it, and if you do take advantage of it now, you can look at the plot and the grid, which are available now, and of course that'll finalize. Scott, I know you're using it that weekend, yeah?
Yeah, I highly recommend using Optix. The plot is a huge part of of my handicapping. Not only for Derby weekend, but for all my work at Santa Anita, and now I'm doing Indiana Grand as well, which has been real helpful because I'm not as familiar with the horses and don't have my own notes. So the plots are a huge part of what I'm working with at Indiana. And you can follow my work along. I'll have my normal coverage of Santa Anita and Indiana Grand, but my articles next week that are free on Brisnet and Twin Spires will all be centered around the Kentucky Derby and the races, the undercard as well. So you can find out more of my opinions on there as well as when we record the video.
Cool. All right, you guys. Well, thank you again for watching. I know it's kind of wordy, but should help you out and give you a lot of information while you're sort of sorting out your thoughts in this week leading up to the draw. Check back next week. That again is recording on Wednesday.